All right, so today is day 22 of 100 Days of ML, and I'm going to be planning out my ML product, which I'm going to be building for the next week or two. So this product is mainly focused on the pipeline, the ML pipeline, and less on the model itself. So first step, I'm going to be looking at a simple ML model to deploy. For this, I'm thinking I'm just going to go over to TensorFlow tutorials and then pick out a very simple model that they have already pre-built, and I'm just going to utilize that. So I then have to create the architecture for the pipeline. So a lot of design and analysis has to go in before I want to start building the entire pipeline itself. Make sure I know what components I want to use and how I want the architecture to flow. So choose how to build front end. This is mostly going to be Streamlit, but let's work at the first three steps for now. Okay. Sentiment analysis using IMDb. This could work. Regression model using, what is it using? Is it custom? One dense layer. After normalizing. I know there's multiple dense layers we can change up. And here's the full model. There's a couple more layers added on. I think I'm gonna choose the text classification. It's a very simple model, and I guess this would work. Okay, so I have this picked out. Next, create architecture for pipeline. Okay. All right. So there's different orchestration tools. I think I'm going to be using Apache Beam. But for the most part, it's the same steps: data ingestion, data validation, pre-processing, model training, analysis, and deployment. Okay, but how am I going to use metadata, and do I need a database for that? I need to check my notes on my iPad. The first things first, we're gonna start with data ingestion. And for that, let's see, IMDb dataset. Get the URL, and then what do we do here? We decompose it. Load the dataset. So all of this has to be part of kind of data ingestion. So I could specify the URL and then use utils.get file, or let's see how I do it with TFX. I could either import TF record files or import remote data files from cloud storage bucket. So I guess I could store this IMDb dataset, the .csv file, as a bucket in Google Storage Buckets. I think that would be a good way to practice. Or I can store it locally and I can import it that way. Okay, I think I'm going to use the Google Cloud version. I need to make note of all of this somewhere. I don't know where though. I'll just keep a mental note for now. Okay, what I'm going to do is set up an organization for this. What I'm going to call it is I don't know. I don't know what to call it. It's a very like private project. It's not really open for open source. Think of this later. Okay, so IMDb, I'm going to download the dataset, put it into Google Storage Buckets, and then that's going to solve my entire data ingestion part. And then I'll load the model from Google GCP. All right, what's next? Data validation. Well, all of that stuff should be fairly easy. I think let's look at what the IMDb dataset looks like. Then does it have does it print the dataset anywhere? So the dataset's already split into train and test. I have to take that into consideration when I'm doing the data ingestion. It's not one CSV, but it's two. I believe. Let me just download it and just check real quick. I'll let that download. So for pre-processing, they're standardizing, tokenizing, and vectorizing the data. And I have to do this with TFX. There would be step like 3, I guess, in the pipeline. And I'd have to use TFT, TensorFlow Transform. So I'm looking at TFT right now, and I'm checking if I can standardize, tokenize, and vectorize. I think I remember reading about this somewhere. Yeah, so you can generate n-grams, bag of words, all sorts of NLP stuff. I might have to write a custom. I don't know if TensorFlow Transform has what I need. Apart from that, I also need to figure out how to structure my project. I'm going to be looking at this, guys. Okay, this is done. Okay, let's see. Where's my... So it's a train and test folder itself, and inside that folder it also has another classification of negative and positive. So in the negative, it contains .txt with most likely a paragraph. Yeah. So all of this is for negative, and I guess each file contains a paragraph. All right. So how is that going to fit into data ingestion? Converting custom data into TF record data structures. Okay, so I'd have to pre-process the data a little bit. I need to convert it. I need to create a TF example structure for every data record in the data set. Which would be a key value mapping. So I'd have to read the original data file, convert every data record into a TF example data structure, and then save all records in a TF record file. And have to do this for like all of the files as well. So all the data isn't contained in one file, but it's across multiple. All right. So I'll have to keep like traversing through the file. Okay. Let me check if there's anything online for. Okay, so this file apparently converts records, multi-CPU, uses multi-CPU. Converted data to data set to data records, TF records, I mean. I think I'd have to write a custom for this because of its structure. I could load it in using TensorFlow datasets, but I want to keep away from that because I do want to spend time building the pipeline. So I guess this would give me some practice on how to like basically build the entire pipeline from scratch. All right, I guess I'll have to create a custom preprocessor. Well, it's not even pre-processing, it's just like a loading the data into TF records. Like just the loading the dataset part. Okay, so that's going to take a significant amount of time because I have no idea how to do it. I just have to try things until I get it working. Okay, so what is the TF record dataset like? What are these other files, by the way? Labeled bow feet? Okay, so this is URLs which are negative. Interesting, and URLs that are positive. It has a .vocab file with all the vocabulary. er.txt? Or is this error? Not sure. README. What's the size of this data set? Okay, that's a pretty big. Wait, no, that's not the size of it. I think this is the size right here. 200 megabytes. It's not bad. I could probably push the entire data set to the GitHub repo if I wanted to. So what I have to do here is basically, I need to figure out the structure for a TF record. Okay, so I think I can spend more time on this when I'm actually building the product. What I'm going to be doing is sticking primarily to the planning part. So I got the first few steps planned out. I just have to analyze the model, convert it into TF records, then I can use TFX data ingestion to load in the model. I'll have to store it on yeah, I'm not going to be storing it on GitHub. I'll be storing it on like cloud buckets. So I'll have to push the data set onto there. Um, I think initially what I want to do is write some code to first process this file right here, turn it into a TF record, and then I'll push the TF record into GCP. That way, when I'm loading it during the ML pipeline, I don't have to go through and worry too much about processing the data set. So once it's just a TF record, I think I can pull it from GCP Cloud Buckets and directly load it into my pipeline. All right, so that's the first part. And then comes data validation and I guess pre-processing. Validation should be okay. I'll just have to be displaying a bunch of information about the data set. And for for pre-processing, I have to figure out whether I want to continue using TFT or if I'm going to use some other pre-processing type library like Keras. They use Keras in the tutorial, but if I want to stick to the custom end and create it as like part of the pipeline and a component, I'll have to try to use TFT. So I'll get to that. That's about the first 3 stages in the pipeline. So, all right, so what I'm going to do is now set up the organization and then I'm going to create a project. For the organization name, don't think it really matters. How are GitHub organizations met? Structure. So I can obtain repositories and teams. Right now it's just going to be me, I guess. So in this case, I think the organization should be like an umbrella where the project should be focused on this. So if I do give it an account name, I'll make it something very, I guess, reusable. I can always rename it. Okay, so I think for now I just call it after my initials or not. That's whack. Don't even know my own password, I guess. Planning projects. What do I spend time on most day to day? Okay, so I'm gonna create a repository, call it something like text classification or something using IMDb. And then in my repository structure, I'm gonna have to figure out the structure. Front end, I'll have an app section. I also have models. I'll have documentation. I guess I have to read more about ML ops here, because this guy puts out the entire structure here in his repository and how to his pipeline structure is interesting. It's not automated. It's manual. It's all done like manually. But what I'm trying to build is like an automated pipeline. So I do have to build everything as components. So I can't follow this guy's structure at the moment. Okay. Uh, the question here is if I do build the pipeline, does it all have to be like in the same file? Or like, am I going to have a directory for each stage in the pipeline? Reading the textbook at the moment to see how the pipeline is structured. He's using kubeflow pipelines, both locally and on a kubeflow pipeline. This is perfect. This guy gives like entire structure of the repository. So project name, ML includes machine learning related stuff, pipelines, includes the actual ML pipeline code. What else does he have on the root? Oh, this is just check out his repository. Oh, nope, there's no repository for it. Okay, wow, there's a lot of information here. I do also want to look into packaging it as shown in this, like a way to pip install. Yeah, that's right. So I do want to provide this additional feature as well. Even maybe even like use it as a Git Docker container. So I do have to check into this as well. In terms of testing it, I'm going to be building a Docker container, adding all of the dependencies, and using that Docker container to build my product. This is the ML pipeline structure. Yes, init, data, util, KFP runner, local beam, DAG runner, utils, pipeline.py, CLI.py, dollar pipeline name, train.py, pipeline name. What is pipeline name? So, okay, what is data? Data, small amounts of representative data to run locally for testing and on CI. Okay. So maybe like 10% of the actual data set put into data for testing. Util code that is reused and shared across pipeline name. Not necessary to include input function and model utils. Okay. But I'm not really sure what code's gonna get reused. Abstract some parts of on utility module like building named input and output layers for the Keras model. So he's building like the graph and he's putting that into util. I guess I could do that as well while building model util. But does he has a model.py, so I guess in his model.py he probably calls the model utils, which contains like the basic structure for the model. And he's just putting the model together in model.py. And training, he's training the model. I need to bookmark this. Pre-processing, z-score pre-processing util. So he puts, where does he put that? I don't see it in this. He probably puts it in the util folder. CLI entry point and command line interface for the pipelines. So command line interfaces. I think I read that somewhere here, right here. So I could have like help. What other? Download data, optimize, train model. Towards that, train model, and predict tags. So the user would have to run train model, optimize, maybe, and then predict tags when they provide predict tags, and then provide like an input, like this text. It returns the result, the prediction. That's pretty neat. Oh. I think for deployment or hosting, I'm going to keep that out. What I'll do is probably just build a Docker container and I'll just put it onto like Docker Hub or something, or provide a link, or provide the Docker file in the GitHub repo, and provide code on how to build the Docker container after cloning the repository. So this is a pretty good structure to go off of. So I'll have the project name, the root directory, ML, which contains the ML related code. And inside ML, I'll have pipelines. And let's come to this guy's organization. Check how he did it. So he has two sections, one for app and one for the project. And inside the project, he has like everything in here. Okay, this is good so far. I think I have a sense of direction. I also created organization. What I'm going to be doing tomorrow is setting up my GitHub repository, organizing it with the structure, and what else do I have to do? So I'll work from the pipeline part. So what I'm going to be doing first is kind of just getting the data in, having my data in the right structure. And then from there, I'm going to move on step by step in the ML pipeline. So after that, data validation, then data pre-processing. And while I'm doing that, I have to make sure to also build tests for it. So for example, if I end up putting my data set on Google Buckets, I guess, where would I put the data set? That's a good question. I'll have to look into that too. Yeah, so if it's not on Google Cloud Buckets, public users cannot download the dataset and pre-process it the way I am. But if it's on Google Buckets, I'll have a credential key and I will be able to load in the dataset. So I have to check that out because let's say a user does download, but does it matter if I just save the pre-trained model? Do they really need to train using the dataset? That's a good question. Maybe I could just provide the boilerplate code and suppose they do have the dataset in their local repository. They could utilize it that way. Yeah, that's actually a good idea. So I'm going to skip the GCP buckets part, have it in my local repo, but not on GitHub. So I'm going to add it to gitignore or something. And in README, I can specify how the data is pre-processed and how to utilize like my code to process the data. Okay, that's great. Okay, that's good for now. That's good for today. So I think I got some of this stuff answered. I'm just going to update the goals and finish it up for today. So this, I think planning out will probably take 2 more days. And then I'll finally be able to start. Even without fully planned out, I think I'll have enough to start off where each day I'll be able to add more code and not worry about the entire structure falling apart. Okay, so that marks the end of today. I'll be back tomorrow to plan out the project and for 2 more days, and then I'll finally be able to get started on building out this product.